So what do you think actually makes a good relationship overall?
First of all, getting in the right relationship in the first place.
Hi everyone, just something a little bit different today. I'm sitting down with Harvey Hooke,
Hey.
a relationship specialist extraordinaire.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, definitely. So why don't you tell people who you are, what you do, all that kind of thing?
Hi, my name is Harvey Hooke. I work as a dating and relationship coach. I work on an international scale. So, in 2015, I was actually touring the world, coaching guys, like confidence skills, what it was like to basically talk to women, actually like to get out of their shell and to actually develop who they were. Only to find that did not make me happy. So now when I returned back to Australia, now I actually started a new business. I work for myself currently, where I now coach women. And it's interesting because I work with women, but it's more importantly, it's 90% women, but honestly, how do I say this? It's like I don't work on what people have to do, for example, in a relationship. There's a little bit of that, but most importantly, I work on how people believe a situation should go. You know, like for example, if they're in a relationship and it's not really going like very well, sometimes it's the nuance about how they view the relationship that actually changes how they look at it. Or if they're single and they're having issues, you know, it could be down to the fact that they don't believe that they're enough, or they spend so much time chasing one part about themselves when it's not really about that at all. Yeah, that's basically it in a nutshell.
Excellent, fantastic. So, what's the main difference you find between working with women and working with men? So, I know I had my own ideas of what the main difference would be. Like, I would imagine the difference is like guys just tend to want to be more like, let's go pick up chicks and let's get laid, or let's go out and do this, and how do I meet girls and how do I talk to girls. And with girls, it's more about how do I keep the guy and how do I find a great guy.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that, because honestly, like having been on both sides of the coin, you kind of realize that there are those similarities, but the difference is mainly how do I say? It's like the gender stereotypes. So it's like you would. Like, as you said, it's like, oh, it's the man's role to take the action. Yeah. You know what I mean? What I do mostly is when people actually come to me, for example, a woman might come to me and ask me, it's like, are men like this? And the first thing I say is, well, people are like this, So I'm basically trying to show people that it's not really about gender at all. Sure, I work with women, it's because I'm speaking to a particular audience, for example. But I get heterosexual, homosexual, both men and women coming to me for their different things. So the major differences, by the way, are the stereotypes there, but they create these problems. So as you said, like before, like the man's problem is to, like how does he like go and he speak to the woman and be more masculine and all that kind of stuff. What I find women problems, not necessarily keeping guys, to be honest. It's a little bit of that, but it's more, how do I say, it's more like nuanced understanding the differentiations between things. So it's the same thing, for example, a guy, like, let's look at this example of a guy who wants to be better at talking to women, for example. He's probably looking at the situation as it's this very one situation. So it's like, okay, there's a girl in a bar, I want to go speak to her. Yeah. But outside of that, it's actually a lot more nuanced. So this is what I refer to as sensory acuity. So I don't know how many words they have for it, but for example, Eskimos or Inuits, they have quite a number of words for snow. Yeah. They got to know the kind of snow you can walk on, the kind of snow you can eat, the kind of snow you can build an igloo out of. Yeah. You put them in the middle of New York, put them in the middle of Melbourne, they're going to have a bad time. And it's the reason why they can make a key number of distinctions. So this is basically the foundation of my work, is I help people understand the nuance in each situation. So for example, if it's a guy whose problem is I want to be more confident, it's showing him that there's probably a chance where he's already been confident before in the past and extrapolating that idea. Similarly with a woman who's probably, look, one of the biggest situations I have that is a repeated situation isn't what I refer to as an ex, partner or an ex, husband. Like someone who's probably on the way out. Yeah. And it's the nuance there is showing them that, look, maybe they actually still want to be together. They just never were equipped enough to handle each other and handle the individual situations, because sometimes it's not fucking about them. So you would look at it like, for example, sometimes it's also worth like them breaking up. Dating relationships, sometimes we get into the wrong relationships in the first place. But look, the stereotypes that I find are very interesting because they put a lot of pressure on people. Sure, there's the idea of masculine and feminine, which I'm sure you know all about. Which, if you're watching this, masculine being energy 1 and feminine being energy A. They're both very similar on two sides of the coin. Both men and women have masculine and feminine energy. They're just the ways that we interact with the world. But when you're in a relationship, what you do is you trust the particular energy that you have to your partner. So if you're someone who's more in your feminine, for example, you almost kind of want your partner to be more in their masculine because you trust it with them. Doesn't mean you aren't a feminine person or a masculine person in other parts of your life, but when you're in the relationship, you're trusting them. And so what I find here is that's not even gendered. You know what I mean? But when you work with, for very specifically, heterosexual women who are more in their feminine, who want a heterosexual man who's more in their masculine, there tends to be specific roles that people are interested in. One thing that I did when I was working with men, right? To allow them to connect to their woman better, they needed to connect with their feminine side better. Similarly now, when I work with women who are more in their feminine, it's like I have to show them that it's okay to understand their masculine side a bit more, because that means they can communicate to someone who's more in their masculine better. For example, one common fucking problem that I get a lot, sorry, I don't know if I can swear or not, I will.
That's fine.
Alright, you can bleep it. There we go. Is that, for example, a lot of women are like, oh, I met this guy, it's really going really well, then we organised the dates, and then nothing ever happened. And I get to that situation, and it's like, look, they never actually organised the date, because they're too afraid that if they do that, they're too masculine in the situation. That they're like, this day, this time, and it's like, if they don't set a date, then they haven't got a date, which is a simple way of looking at it. And that might be a masculine thing to be more goal-directive, but it's a way to connect with someone who's probably more in their masculine. Yeah.
It's like saying, well, you know, if you want to connect with them, you got to be a lot more direct in the way you communicate.
Yeah.
And like understand that men think and communicate in a direct way.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's funny you say that, because I find that in my own experience and my own development in terms of like meeting women and all that kind of thing, for me it was a big part was paying a lot more attention and listening a lot more. Yeah. Which is interesting that you say with the women, it's like, I maybe I need to be a little bit more direct in the way that I speak as a woman. I need to be more clear and concise, and rather than saying, well, you should know why I'm pissed off, saying exactly why you're pissed off, and then working with the man to solve the problem rather than stewing in it. Yeah,
and also like how to build up your partner as well. Like, for example, someone who's more in their feminine, who's got a feminine core, so to speak, in order for that person to be almost the best person they can be, they need to have the space given to them. You know, someone, for example, someone who's more in their feminine, when you're finding out about their problems, you don't necessarily need to solve them. Yeah. You need to allow that person the space to feel that they can do it themselves and almost empower themselves. This is why you get a lot of women's empowerment movements, because it's like they're people who are more in their feminine are giving themselves the space because that's what they need. Similarly, someone who's more in their masculine, which is very interesting, needs to almost be like the head. Like, it needs to be have ownership of something, right? So it's like having a team and kind of being the head of the team, which then I'm getting into this thing, but it's really interesting if you like this or whatever. I don't know if you do, but it's like, because then we can break that down into masculine, they're mature and immature. You know what I mean? Like, for example, the immature masculine is someone who's really good at stepping up to a situation, but only up to a point. And once they max out, then they step down, you know? And it's like nurturing this. And one of the things I find when I'm working with women, for example, is showing them the nuanced understanding in just people's emotions that, you know, some people are really like professional when it comes to their workplace, for example, but it might be a specific emotion that they struggle with. It might be anger, it might be fear, it might be anxiety, it might be jealousy, and it reverts them from an adult to a childlike state. And it's being able to distinguish between who's someone who's, you know, who's acting as an adult, who's in their more mature side. Yeah. You know, and it's like learning how to speak to different levels. For example, a very long time ago, I used to really struggle with anger. You know, if someone was angry at me, I emotionally shut down. And how I had to deal with myself was treating myself as a child. Yeah. You know, it's showing, but it's like, what do you give a child? Binary options. Chocolate or vanilla. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. It's like, you can either go to bed now, or you can go to bed 5 minutes ago.
Yeah, go to bed. Both your options, right?
Your options.
But that's how you deal with someone who can't necessarily. There's not growing. So I generally categorize three things. You got the child, like the child growth, the teenage growth, where someone needs to experiment and be more rebellious, and then there's the adults who can actually make those nuanced distinctions and step up, not necessarily step down. I don't know if I answered your question, but I think so.
It was there. There was some good meat there. It's great. So what's the most common question you get asked by one of your straight female clients, so your main clients?
Yeah. that question is actually really interesting to answer because there's not a common thing. There's common themes, but there's not really a common question.
What's the most common theme, like?
Common theme is, like I said before, like kind of like lack of understanding of the situation. The theme generally, what I find is that a lot of people are afraid to take action or express themselves because of some future discomfort. You know, like oh, there's this guy at my work. He's really fucking things up for me, or I like him, or whatever, but I don't want to make things awkward in the future. You know, and it's this fear of the future. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. There's a Tibetan word for it. It's called Shenpa. It means scratching the itch.
It sounds very Zen.
Shenpa. Yeah, I guess, yeah. But Shenpa is literally the idea. It's like, you know, it's like you're driving down the road and there's a police officer just pulls you over for a routine check and you're like, I'm guilty. You know, like you're already in jail in your mind, right?
Yeah,
this is what I find a lot of people do. They're like, this issue is there, and they keep scratching it. They're like, okay, but this will happen, and they've missed the first step, which is probably none of these things will happen, and you're dealing with a human who has human emotions.
And even if they do happen, then everything will be okay.
Yeah,
which is actually exactly. I mean, you talk about this Tibetan philosophy, and then you come back to an old Western philosophy, and you might not have heard of it. It's called Stoicism.
Yeah,
it's like the Stoicism where it's like, just assume the worst is going to happen, but you're going to be okay anyway. You know, it's like so no matter what happens, it'll be fine. And like the way they sort of, I mean, there's some pretty crazy things that we won't go. Like they
go for it.
They took the logic to a pretty crazy conclusion in the end, which is probably the reason why it died out. But
so
like, well, you know, if shit gets bad enough, you can just kill yourself. So
oh, interesting. I didn't realize.
Yeah, that's and that's not even the worst of what there was. Some pretty crazy stuff. Go and Google it if you. Well, I don't use Google anymore. DuckDuckGo or Quantit. Go have a search.
Sorry? Google is evil, apparently.
Google are evil, yes.
Oh, okay,
this is the discussion I just had before, which will be in my other video.
Okay.
Google are evil. We don't use Google unless we have to use. We use YouTube, obviously.
Yeah, which
is there's no mainstream option just yet, but we won't talk about that today.
Yeah. That's for part 2.
What do you think? That's when we rant and rave about the evils of everything in the world. So what do you think actually makes a good relationship overall?
First of all, getting in the right relationship in the first place.
That's a good.
That's one of the biggest things. Is a lot of people don't actually know what they specifically want or need, and they jump into the first relationship or they jump into something that's good enough. Or one of my least favorite words in the world is fine.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, oh, that's fine. He's fine. It's good enough. You know, sometimes good isn't good enough. So it's interesting because helping people often select. Look, one of the first questions I ask people is seriously like, with any problem, it's like, if you had it 100% your way, how would you have it?
Yeah.
And a lot of people are just like, no one's ever asked me that before. I never thought of that. I'm like, interesting. And so it's like understanding that, you know, they can pick or they can decide the right kind of relationship they want from the start and move in that direction. Now, obviously, the second thing is proximity is power. Like, once you know what kind of relationship you want to be in, then it's really important to put yourself in a position where you're probably going to meet that kind of person.
I mean, that the advice is pretty good there, but
go for it.
For me, it's like, it works well for women, obviously, because they are, the women are,
let's do this.
They are sort of more of the ones that choose in terms of, I mean, they're the gatekeepers of sex, and men are sort of the gatekeepers of relationships, but when it comes to, in terms of options, in terms of, like, they have a lot more power in who they associate with and the guys that they do spend time with, whereas I find, like, for men, it's a little bit, obviously, we, as men, and, you know, I've gone out and, just like you, we've been through similar backgrounds in terms of going out and approaching and all that kind of thing. Like, you put yourself out there, and you sort of, it's like you shoot your. My grandfather. So probably the best advice I was ever given when I was a kid, and I just completely forgot it until I was, you know, in my mid-20s, was, if you want to catch your pigeons, you got to shoot into the flock. And,
Interesting.
Which is some great advice.
But here's the thing I'm talking about, though, because what kind, if that's your philosophy, right? Then what kind of flock are you shooting at?
That's a good point, actually.
That's what I mean by proximity is power. Because if you believe that that's your power, that the only thing you can do is shoot into the flock, then you have to decide which kind of flock you're going to shoot at.
And that brings us, that sort of raises an interesting point in that, as a man, you do have the power to choose who you approach as well.
Yes.
Which, I mean, it's, for guys who are just starting
that only men can approach.
Well, that's exactly right as well. And this is something that women, I think, for women, it's like, I wouldn't say that they have to go out and go, do the whole street walk up and say, hey, I thought you looked fantastic and I just wanted to say hi, let's go for coffee. More just, I think women can initiate an approach just with eye contact a lot more. I think women should be a lot more...
And that's the stuff that I do, because a lot of women, I find, at least from my coaching, at least from my clients, for example, they're like, how do I get someone to approach me? And I show them that actually a lot of guys are afraid, is this whole idea of sexual rejection. It's like if you go up, because people often think it's like that you as a person are getting rejected. Yeah. And it's
not true at all.
It's not true. It's like you decide, it's like, I like to look at it as like cake. You're at a party, someone offers you cake. You can accept it, yes or no. If they want to eat the cake, you give it to someone else. Or you eat the cake. Yeah. It's not a big deal. And
it could be the best cake in the world. And it's like, look, I just don't feel like cake right now. I had a lot of cake already today.
And that was actually something that really comes home to me, because when I was like super anxious and stuff like that, I worked at a cupcake store. So I would go out and I would have a box of cupcakes. My aim was to go out and walk the streets and give someone a box of cupcakes. And I was so nervous. I remember I went up to a couple and I was like, do you want some of these? And they were like, no. And I was like, okay. But, for all they knew, because of my body language and things like that, they were like, this person probably has poisoned them. What's wrong with them? And I was like, but look, they're the world's fucking best cupcakes. Yeah. And it's like, in the end, you can eat them. It's interesting that you say that. So what I mean by proximity is power, by the way. It's like, if you want someone, for example, who likes to party, then probably go to a nightclub. Yeah. The people I deal with aren't necessarily people who want to go out and party all the time. So it's like, we look at things like values. Where are these people potentially hanging out? It's interesting because you go to Tinder, you get Tinder people. You go to a nightclub, you get nightclub people. You go to a library, you get library people. Yeah. Things like that. But it's just more because the truth is, a lot of, this is my big fucking rant, by the way, but it's like a lot of men's dating advice out there. Like the whole how to talk to girls, things like that. One of the things that really got me was making it something that you do and not something that you are. For example, the whole go up to the girl and say, hi, I think you're really attractive. Do you want to go get some coffee? Yeah. It's a very practiced thing that a lot of guys do. And it will come down to it, outside of that practice, it becomes almost impossible for these people. And so what I find is one of the biggest things, this is why I get to the nuance of the situation, because it's like, for example, someone gave you a sword and they show you how to cut like this and how to cut like this. And then someone comes at you and cuts like this and you need to learn how to block it because you've never known how to do this other way. So it's like, what I try and do is I get down to the real nuts and bolts of the situation to show people at the very core of it, at the core, maybe how the sword works, how the balance works. Yeah. One of the best lessons I ever had was from when I was learning to drive. And I had this Confucian-style driving instructor. Like Confucius says, like that kind of jokes. He'd pull me over and say, why does everyone, what does it say? Why is everyone speeding? Because they're in a rush. I'm like, okay. It's like, why is everyone in a rush? Because they're speeding. I was like, I didn't get it. But he knew that the only reason why I, as a person, was not knowing how the gears work, or if you're in America, how stick shift works, was because I just didn't know how the gears worked. Now, you don't have to know how the fuel burns and the chemical reactions because you're not a chemical engineer, but it does pay to know how you as a human works. So that way you can understand other people in the nuanced situation. For example, going up and saying, hi, I just met you, you'd like some coffee, like to grab coffee right now. That would really work for some people who are, how do I say, maybe more open to it, more in that situation. But what about someone who's really shy? You're going to really scare them off. Yeah. And so it's knowing how people are in that situation, learning how to calibrate as well. Yeah, that's a big thing. Anyway, I hope I've answered that question. I don't even know.
Yeah, well, I mean, we sort of went down a bit of a rabbit hole as well. Yeah. I asked you what makes a good relationship. Hope you enjoyed part 1 of my discussion with Harvey Hooke. And next up, part 2. Don't forget to like and subscribe and check out my other videos. See you soon.